You know, I knew where things were coming from, but in certain areas I still didn't feel any different, because a lot of my experiences was like loss of a father at a very early age and some trauma at an early age that it was pre-verbal that I didn't have words for. So I could feel sensations in my body in certain circumstances, which there was nothing that I could attach to. So I could talk all of the sessions I had in terms of psychotherapy. Yeah, it helped. Yeah, I made sense of things, but my body didn't necessarily change. And sometimes I'd have responses that just didn't make sense. But it started to get me thinking around the sense of, there's more to this than just words. And you've got to process the energy and what's in your body, but then put words to it so that you can make sense of that and integrate that in your sort of adult ego state as we are now. The work is about taking away what isn't yours, bringing back what is yours, and working out a paragraph that makes sense of all of that, and making sense of who we are and who we are at our sort of soul's blueprint.
Welcome to Pathways to Wellbeing. And I'm so excited today because I have the privilege of talking to Dr. Tracy King. And Dr. Tracy King is a clinical psychologist, Hungarian life coach, yoga and meditation teacher, energy healer, and shamanic practitioner. So all the things that I love. So welcome. And I'm really excited about this conversation. And Dr. Tracy blends science and spirituality and offers holistic healing, balancing the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual energy bodies, all the energy bodies. And she specializes in women's health, trauma recovery, relationship, and neurodiversity. And you integrate psychology, yoga, meditation, energy healing, and shamanic practices into your work, which is absolutely beautiful. And I know you also emphasize the importance of narrative and meaning making in recovery and empowering your clients to rewire their stories. Your work centers around the nervous system and balancing the nervous system and deep transformation, bridging modern science and ancient wisdom to help clients heal, grow, and reclaim their potential with compassion and insight. Oh my goodness, I love that. It's just so heart-opening, isn't it? And today's conversation is all about shake up your system, shamanic wisdom for when talk therapy isn't quite enough, or isn't enough really. So welcome, Dr. Tracy. I'm so grateful for you to take this time, and it's midnight for you there, so even more grateful for that. So I have a lot of questions for you, but I don't think we're going to get through them all today, and we'll just, go with the flow. But is there anything that I haven't added there what you'd like to share about yourself personally and your work?
I mean, I think that was a really great summary. As you were saying it, I'm thinking, okay, well, what else have I got to say on top of that? However, I guess I do, in my work, I do combine everything together, but some of the ways that I'm pulled in work, I'm not able to always do that explicitly. So, for example, I work in court settings, and I work in kind of insurance settings and real medical settings. And obviously, it shouldn't be, obviously, should it? But it isn't always able to have that whole integration of the spiritual side of things. And I think, gradually I've managed to sort of get it through the back doors, sometimes and make sense of it with people if it resonates for them. And I'm not somebody that's about pushing this on anyone. It's about seeing whether it fits with someone and meeting the client where they're at, really, I guess is just my only addition.
Yeah, that's incredible, because they're usually very closed doors in those environments, and to be able to get through, in the back door and do some very profound work with people who truly need it, right? And I just love that. All right, let's dive in. First question is, what made you realize that traditional talk therapy alone wasn't enough for healing deep trauma? Like, was there a pivotal moment or a specific time or experience that you can share that led you to the shamanic practices?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that can go twofold from my own personal experience and
Yeah.
also from my client work. So I guess I'll start at the beginning,
From
which is
your
really the
personal experience, and then we'll go
yeah.
into more client stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, from my personal experience, when I was training in psychotherapy, part of that training is about having your own therapeutic, yeah, what's the word, practice,
Hmm.
sessions, etc. And, I was obviously very knowledgeable because I'd been through training. I was already a psychologist and I trained in psychotherapy and I could kind of join the dots. So I had all the speak of what had gone on in my past, and I knew where things were coming from. But in certain areas, I still didn't feel any different because a lot of my experiences was like loss of a father at very early age and some trauma at an early age that it was pre-verbal that I didn't have words for. So I could feel sensations in my body in certain circumstances which there was nothing that I could attach to. So I could talk all of the sessions I had in terms of psychotherapy. Yeah, it helped. Yeah, I made sense of things, but my body didn't necessarily change. And sometimes I'd have
Mm.
responses that just didn't make sense. So that was my
Mm.
sort of experience of thinking, well, hang on a minute, there's a lot more here than I can make sense of. And
Mm.
even in therapy, we started to think about the energy that you hold within your body is from your birth experience. So an example of that is when I was born, I was delivered by forceps. And
Right.
if you think of that symbolically, my first experience of this world is if I don't do something myself, someone's going to put these clamps around my head and pull me out. And I've got dents in my head from the forceps.
Wow.
So I can only
Yes.
assume that that was painful for me as a baby. So it's kind of like this internalized message then that I thought of, okay, so that's my first bit of narrative. It's like if, obviously I don't have the words as a baby just coming out, but your system makes sense of it that if I don't get out of this hole myself, someone's going to pull me and that's going to really, really hurt. So
Yeah.
I then became someone that's super independent, just did everything myself, didn't really ask for help, all of those kind of things. And again, rationally, if I was doing therapy with anyone or if I was talking to friends, I'd have no issue with someone asking for help. I didn't have
Mm.
any beliefs that someone would misjudge me. So it didn't sort of make sense. And, we then put this narrative around it that really felt like it fitted for me. It's not something we can ever prove, justify, really get verification for. But it started to get me thinking around the sense of, there's more to this than just words and you've
Mm.
got to process the energy and what's in your body, but then put words to it so that you can make sense of that and integrate that in your sort of adult ego state as we are now.
Yeah.
Mm.
Fascinating, isn't it? Isn't and it's that just it just makes so much sense, right? Well, for me
Mm.
it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that the trauma that's held in our body and understanding that it's stored there in the body is not and that it's not actually easily accessed through cognition, right? Through just
Mm.
talking about it, as you just expressed, like as a baby, we just don't know, these things. We have no words for what happened, but the experience is stored in that. Can you
Mm.
explain with the work that you do? Maybe could you explain what you've termed, because I read your bio, it's very exciting, what you term shamanic scripting. And so as an effective way of accessing that trauma to heal from the root, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so what I've termed shamanic scripting is really a combination of standard therapeutic practices where we are talking and we are doing, say, specialist trauma treatments, for example, like eye movement, desensitization, reprocessing, which I can say a bit more about in a bit. But that's a standard evidence-based recognized therapy, and it's combining techniques like that also with energy healing as well and helping people to access some shamanic practices so that they can build their resilience in their nervous system and use those as techniques where they can get a sense of self-efficacy and autonomy in that. And they can use these techniques to actually really kind of build that resilience in their nervous system and widen what's known as that window of tolerance so that with the shamanic practice, it's almost like it's kind of weaving in and out of things. So we do the shamanic practice to build their resilience.
Yep.
Then when that resilience is built and it's feeling stronger, we then start to actually do some energy healing, which is healing. And around shamanic healing, there's
Mm-hmm.
what's called soul extractions, energy extractions, which are kind of all the stuff that the world has thrown at us, maybe in this life or past lives, if that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
It does to me, but I know it doesn't to everyone. So we can sort of stay with it in this life if that's what resonates for someone. And it's in psychology terms, basically that's the same kind of language as what we say when we say that our ego state's been conditioned by our parents, for example. So we can map that onto what's called attachment theory, which is how we interact with our parents is the kind of template for all the other relationships that come after that. So it's a similar kind of thing to how we talk about the when we've got energy that isn't really ours in shamanic practice. Is the
Right.
same as a lot of the psychology theories of we are being conditioned by other people's expectations of us. So a concrete example of that might be if you're a child and you're growing up in a house and you've fallen over and you start crying and your parent says to you, oh, stop, you'll be all right, just get up, get on with it. We start to be conditioned that we mustn't cry, we mustn't show emotion. And that's not who we naturally are at a soul level, or again, if soul doesn't make sense to you, who we are at the core of our own essence. That's
Mm-hmm.
not who we necessarily are, because we're here to feel emotions and that's a natural thing. But we might get that suppressed. So that's someone else's energy that's kind of being imprinted on us. That in
Right.
shamanic practice, you might think of it as you're extracting that. In therapy, you might think of it as a conditioning that's happened. It's like a learned behavior, an adaptation that we've had to do to survive in that original family of origin. So both of those to me felt like they mapped together.
Yep.
So when I'm working with someone, it's kind of looking at which bits need to be healed first, because what I've noticed is if we do one without the other, there's still echoes that come from the other, and they both need to be approached together. But
Yep.
with each individual, the order of which we might do them might come differently depending
Differently.
on who they are as a person, depending on their levels of resilience, depending on what makes sense for them. So for some people, that the key is really, where does someone feel safe? So you might see
Mm-hmm.
someone feel safe in the talking. So you might start with that to build up some safety.
Mm-hmm.
But then you might move more to body-based practices to get their body in this lifetime to feel what it needs to feel. But then we might look at some of the shamanic practices of doing like a power or an extraction or an energy extraction, essentially from
Mm.
or soul extraction, in
You are
shamanic
totally,
practice.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're totally talking my language. I get it and I understand that. But for our listeners who may be just, starting to explore
Mm,
these areas, and I can hear you're bridging it all.
mm,
You're bridging it all. You're actually, and it's almost
mm,
like you're, navigating with the soul or the person
mm.
part of them that, needs that. What's next? What's first? Where do we start?
Yeah.
And really, and that
Yeah.
takes a lot of like tuning in and intuition, but also,
Mm,
like you said, talking, getting a bit of, history and getting some
mm.
rapport going there so that you can tap into the blocks is what I'm hearing. Is that a good
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes, 100%. And then
yeah.
the layer above that is once we sort of take out what isn't ours, we bring back what is ours. So where have we given our power away? Where have we
Mm.
had some bits of our soul that's been lost essentially? So if you think of a trauma, when that happens, we may have left a part of ourselves there, to protect ourselves. We cut off, we dissociate, we have to take a step back. And
Mhm.
part of us gets left there. If we think of that cognitively, part of the memories and the order of the memories can get left in that experience, which is why our brains keep repeating and putting that on replay and going back there with flashbacks, for example. Um,
Yes. And
and we
behavior.
want,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's like reenactment of things that are even
Yeah.
out of our conscious awareness that we don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, I always
Yeah.
use an example because it was quite a stark example of a client I had that was hit by a red car. And whenever she then saw red, she would have exactly the same feelings as she did in the car accident, but she
Yeah.
never pieced that together. So
Yeah.
it can be that associative cue that can just take us straight back there.
Yeah, the
And I,
association.
yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And
Um,
I think it's, yeah, I mean, ultimately, like all of this sounds quite complex, but I think if I was going to sum it up in a few sentences, the work is about taking away what isn't yours, bringing back what is yours, and working out a paragraph that makes sense of all of that. Essentially, that's
yeah,
precisely, we're making sense of who we are and who we are at our sort of soul's blueprint
rebel.
before
Mm.
all of this stuff happened to us.
Yeah, with all the layers, right? Yeah, that and just
Yeah,
peeling those back and getting, yeah, that's beautiful. And wow.
yeah,
And I love that, that's yeah, a simple explanation of that. But there's something just dropped, but then it's gone.
yeah.
It'll come back. It'll come
It
back.
will. It will. Absolutely.
Um,
I mean,
um,
one of the other things that I use if someone comes in to me, not if someone's referred by an insurance company and they're coming through the sort of formal sense,
yeah.
but if someone's coming to me for more of the spiritual work, one of the things that I often do is use methods of divination to get a core narrative of someone. So by that I mean I do Akashic Records readings, so I might tap into the
Uh-huh.
Akashic Records and get a narrative of what their soul's characteristics are like and what their life purpose is. Not to say this is you and this is your fate and this is how you have to be, but
Mm,
to get like this core document that we then think about together in the work that we do and think, okay, well, this is an idea about how you might have been if none of these things happened. This is an idea about what's happened because all these things have happened. What do you want that script to be in the future? How would you like that to
mm,
be? Because again, if we've had lots of trauma in this lifetime and past lifetimes, maybe, we don't really know who we are. We lose connection with that to protect ourselves. So to suddenly think, who do I want to be? Who am I at my core? That in itself is really hard because we've not had the life experiences that have made it safe enough to know that. So having like a guided narrative, again, not to be prescriptive, but as a starting point, like as an inspiration,
yeah.
that can sometimes help people
Yeah,
to move forward
absolutely.
with that.
As you
Mm.
say, coming from that traditional way of being, it could
Mm.
it could be, yeah, I love how you've weaved that way of, just incorporating all those areas into getting to that person's needs and why they may
Mm.
be, yeah, coming to you.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously they'd have to be open to it as well, but um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the word that I lost before was
Mm.
reclaim.
Yeah,
Sovereignty,
absolutely.
like peeling back those layers to reclaim who you truly are, right? And
Absolutely.
having this,
Yeah.
so shaman, so when we talk in terms of shaman, is there a specific process or energy
Mm.
practice you use that you would be
Yeah.
open to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with shamanic practice, it's doing things like energy extraction. So that's the taking away of
Uh-huh.
something that isn't there. So I mean, the way that that practically works when you're doing a shamanic healing is the practitioner goes into a trance. So I would be drumming with somebody and I would be kind of getting into an altered state of consciousness. So I'm still present in the room, but
Yeah.
you'd be entering an altered state of consciousness. And then for me, like I connect with a power animal. So that's an idea of an animal that might represent what you feel you might need in that moment for that person. So that's intuitively worked
Mm.
with. And that's about my own practice of attuning to what animal might do that for me. So for me, it's a jaguar that I work with when I'm doing extractions. And again, it's really symbolic and it's a bit like having a dream. It's whatever you have connected with on your own meditations, shamanic journeys, which I can explain the difference between shortly. But it's for me, it's a jaguar, and I just get drawn to things within a person. And I may not have words to that in a healing session either, but it might be that the jaguar wants to kind of scrape at someone's tummy, which sounds a little bit bonkers, but it's just like you're almost visualizing that happen. And a lot of the work I do is not necessarily face to face either, it's online. So you might be, what I would do is I would visualize the person that I'm doing the healing on in my sort of inner space, which is in the kind of area that I've created in my own shamanic journeys. And I
Hmm.
would see them there and I would have my spirit guides and my energy and my intent that is working with them and taking away what they don't need. So in a shamanic healing, I'm quite cognitive, so sometimes I do get words to that. I'm quite sort of claircognizant, so I do get
Yeah.
a lot of sort of knowing and words. But sometimes it's just like an image of like a black goo or something sticky that you think you're removing, and then the person will make sense of that in the narrative. So I'm very led by whoever I work with. So I give them space to see what meaning they make of something first. And then I might say, well, I wonder if it's this, and see how that sits with them.
Yeah. Suggestions and ideas that
Yeah.
come in, you give them. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Just reminded me of my sister sent me a beautiful video the other day of a lady doing her healing work out in nature on a
Mm.
bed, surrounded by horses.
Yeah.
And one of the horses would, as she was working on the person, the horse would hover over and make
Yeah.
sounds and make breaths. And oh my goodness, I could actually feel it, the healing happening through that, just watching this video. And it's incredibly powerful. Energy is so powerful. We're all energy, right? So working with
Absolutely.
that, and then being in, I hear you, you have to get into your own space, like the
Yes.
drumming and dropping into, for you to get those messages is just wow, makes
Absolutely.
total sense to me. So that sounds just good.
Yeah.
I love drumming. It's so
Yeah,
good.
I love drumming. Yeah, I recently did a drum birthing workshop, which was amazing, really
I bet.
amazing. Yeah,
Oh,
really.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then with the healing session, it's not just about the extraction, it's then retrieving what you need to retrieve. And that retrieval can look really different. Again, sometimes it comes in like a word form, when you might actually have a narrative to say, oh, I get the sense that you left some of your energy, with your mom in your childhood. And it might be quite a kind of, I guess, a downloaded intuitive story that you get, that
Mm,
you put to someone. Or again, it might just be, oh, I was given this beautiful rose to put back into your sacral chakra. And it could be anything like that. So it varies per person. And my sense is the way that it comes to me, although I'm saying I'm claircognizant, I would say the way it comes to me adapts depending on the other person's energy and what will make sense to them. So again, if that retrieval or that extraction that I'm doing is from a very young age, sometimes I'll get colors, images, animals more rather than words. And then if somebody is, maybe I've worked with quite a few corporate people that are very, very business-like, and at times they don't even know if they want to be doing what we're doing, but they've been a bit open to it. And I find with them, I do get a lot of more like scientific-y stuff, so it will then resonate with them.
wow. I love
Mm.
that. It's just, yeah, and it just feels so organic and normal to follow
Mm.
that those guides, I guess, in a sense. So beautiful, beautiful work you're doing. I want to ask you, so in terms of cycles of emotional pain, and even after years and years of therapy, what do you see, what do you feel keeps people stuck in those cycles?
Yeah, I mean, I think almost bringing it back as layers. If you think, I mean, we go to in the UK, we go to the GP, you get referred for talking therapy, and often it's cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's very thinking, it's very rational, and
Mm,
that, at a neuropsychological level, that's your frontal part of your brain that has to do that. And
mm,
if we've been traumatized, that part of the brain, it doesn't go completely offline, but it's not as accessible to us as it is before the trauma. So to then have to make sense of things, it's not easy to do for people. And even if when they're feeling calm and they're sitting in the therapy room, they can make sense and they can rationalize it. Once the nervous system is activated and they're in a state of fight or flight, or they're going beyond that and they're shut down, all of that learning is not able to be brought forward. So they just can't do it. So the way that therapy's going now is very much recognizing that as well. So not negating that we need to do some of that belief challenging, those negative thought challenges, but it's about the timing of that. And it's, now we see that there needs to be much more somatic based, body based practices. So things like breath work, things like yoga, things like walking in nature, being around nature, things that are going to embody us in our sensations, because we know that that's what helps us to widen that window of tolerance I was talking about at the start, which is to do with what's called our vagus nerve, which is our cranial nerve that runs from here all the way down and kind of mobilizes your legs when you need to run away from the lion, essentially. So if we get what's called a good tone to our vagus nerve, that window increases. And all of these embodiment type activities that we will do will help that window to increase. And that's what we want to work with. And if we don't have that increased window, then we can't get that frontal bit of the brain online to its maximum potential. And we're less likely to be able to pull forward all of the talking stuff that we do. So that's the kind of layer one is the thinking and the feeling. Then we have the kind of sensations in the body. And then I think if it sometimes even that isn't enough, and sometimes it's in its energetic echoes from other stuff in our energy field. And I think that's when doing some form of energy healing is really, really important. And it's coming back to who are you at a soul. It's kind of almost, I always use the analogy of those Russian dolls that go inside of each other, and we're just through each of those layers to see how far deep we have to go.
Wow, yeah. Total makes sense. And you tapped into something I was going to ask you about, is how can people use energy work in their daily life and in their relationships, like simple practices. And you mentioned and these are the things that I teach as well, the breath work, and I use yoga, and, really sitting in nature on the grass and being in women's circle and all the things to really bring it out and continue to work with it. Is there anything specific you'd like to add to that piece?
I mean, I touched on it earlier in terms of the difference between, meditation is really good as well, to kind of go within yourself and have that help yourself to get to that sort of calm state. It doesn't work, it's not great for everyone initially, and sometimes people need to be activated. So if your nervous system shut down, more of the movement-based practice would be helpful. If your nervous system's quite activated, maybe some, slowing down and meditation would be helpful, and grounding. But again, it's difficult because sometimes we might feel safer in the movement because we're in fight or flight. So we might need to start with some movement and then gradually work towards the meditation and the grounding. But one of the things I mentioned earlier was shamanic journeying and the difference of shamanic journeying and meditation. And in the shamanic journey, it's kind of like it's a deeper sense that we're going into trance, and we're really changing our brain waves. If we was to measure them, we might be going into sort of deeper brain waves, like theta and delta states, rather than just that alpha state that we would go in a meditation, for example, or in sort of standard meditations. And with a shamanic journey, we've got the capacity to sort of tell ourselves a story and make this inner world. Essentially, it always reminds me of the imaginary friends that children often have, where you are, and I work with a lot of young people too, where there are these whole inner worlds, which is essentially like a shamanic journey, where they'll meet with people and they'll meet with animals that help them and give them some resources. And I think doing shamanic journeying and making that part of your sort of daily self-care practice, I think can be really, really helpful, because it's then not just about you having to visit a healer. It's giving you some of the shamanic techniques to own your own healing and to be able to work with that, maybe in between sessions with a healer, or maybe just take that forward yourself, whatever you feel comfortable with. And building those journeys and that story, and maybe having that sort of inner world that you visit, which is your safe space that you can go to and that you revisit, and you maybe ask questions and you use that as a prompt for journaling and start to build your own narratives outside of any work you do with any professional.
I'm glad you mentioned journaling, because I think that's a very powerful tool, isn't it, to really also regulate the nervous system, because I call it brain dumping, just letting whatever comes out come out and just allowing that process. But in terms of like the shamanic healing is like the sound healing, the frequency, like waves, what they call that, the megahertz, and also the drumming, like so that you can actually just relax the nervous system. And I know with the work I do, it's so important to get into that state of relaxation so that you can access, isn't it, the even the trauma or the wounding or whatever comes up, so that you can release, right? So I love what you're talking about there. And
Absolutely. And I
yeah,
think, with the sound, it is very much about that. All of this is, as we said, it's energy, it's vibration, and it's things that we're doing that are, with the sound, we're in training our system to match those sounds. So sometimes that's like a discordant energy that might shake your system up and release something. So taking it away, very much like the shamanic extractions. And sometimes that's a sort of, it's more in tune, and it's kind of bringing things back and integrating everything together, which is heightening the vibration for you with the sounds.
love that. Love that.
Yeah.
I wanted to tap
Yeah.
into something you shared a little earlier that that it's not foreign to me. I've done a lot of past life work, and it's been very powerful and empowering for me to understand. But from your perspective, yeah, what do you think doing the past life, accessing that past life, why do you think addressing past life trauma is vital in achieving full emotional freedom? That was the question.
Absolutely. Well, the way that I make sense of it is that we, at a soul level, I believe we have multiple incarnations where we have kind of lessons of personal development that we do each time. And if we've died by trauma, by some traumatic means, or we've had a trauma that we've not fully resolved in a previous life, we're kind of bringing that as an energetic imprint into this life. And it might be something that makes no sense. So, for example, I've worked with people that are absolutely terrified of water, but they've got nothing in this lifetime that's ever linked to that. Now, from a psychology perspective, you might think it's something called a vicarious trauma, where maybe their mum's been scared of it or their dad's been scared of it. But when we've unpicked that, there's been no history there at all. So with people like that, we've often done past life regressions, and then they have discovered that they've drowned in a past life, for example. So it's about processing, again, what's stuck, not in your physical body, because this is a different body you've incarnated in, but your energetic imprint and your energy body is bringing that trauma with it. And I think that, again, I've referred to layers. So I think if we kind of go back and back and back and we still don't get an answer, then we've kind of got to go back a bit further. It's a bit like digging for gold, maybe. You've got to keep going down until you actually see stuff, and you are literally sieving out to see what's worth looking at and what's not.
Yeah. And what makes sense to them and what doesn't, right? When you're
Absolutely.
sifting through all the layers. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And so how can someone maintain their breakthroughs after they've had these shamanic experiences and achieve the long-term game results? And I think you tapped on it a little bit with the practices at home and following up with maybe some energy work in between. Yeah, but the mind sometimes kicks in, doesn't it, after a session, especially if it's not familiar for you, and can actually interfere with that process.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Because what can happen is you can energetically change someone in terms of their vibration that they're operating at, but actually their earthly life script is one that, I mean, maybe if I make it more concrete, I might be working with somebody that's got a trauma of maybe people pleasing, that's led them to people please all the time, and they've had repetitive relationships that they're in quite toxic dynamics. And you can do all the energy clearing that you want to do, but if that person's going back home to someone that is going to be toxic to them, you're going to get the same build up, essentially. I try to make it even more concrete and think of it. It reminds me, as I'm talking, of like a petrol filter where it's got like dirt in it. You can clear it all out, but then if you go and you put dodgy fuel back in it, you're going to get all sorts of gunk in it. So it's thinking about, and that's, I think, why I think you have to look at every single layer together rather than any one way of working, because it's about acknowledging, okay, well, we've done this, you're at your sort of baseline leaving here, but what are you going back to, and what's then your practical plan, and what are your beliefs that make you think you have to stay there, and what is the kind of solution focused thinking you have to do. And that's why in my mind it has to be physical, spiritual, physical, emotional, and mental that we're doing, so that you can pull all those bits together. So with the shamanic scripting that I do, we kind of create a map of the person. So you've got this blueprint of who they are at a soul level, a blueprint of who they are now, and then who they want to be and what needs to change as a result of that.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful, because environment is everything, isn't it? Like if you continue to show up in the same environment with the same toxic, in terms of even relationships or people that you share a space with, and then the human self tends to default back to the old way of being around those people and doing the experiences, which can override. And this is what my perspective and what you're saying is, override the beautiful work that's just been done. So yeah, and I'd want to feel like after the work that they would come to a conclusion of that's their next aligned step to, to move forward, to actually find a safe place that they can continue practicing the soul work that they want, or choose to practice, for them to continue to embed those, positive layers that have been changed. And that's my roundabout way of saying it. But yeah, it's just, wow. Yeah, it's so important. Environment is so important. And when we come into, when we're talking family as well, right? And because I know my own experience, I get triggered in certain situations which are often avoidable about being there. And I have to prepare myself before that, that is that event, So our trauma is, I feel like it's always there, but we learn how to manage it.
Yeah, definitely. What you're talking about is that you've got to kind of adapt. You have to adapt to survive that environment. So that example I used at the beginning of the child that learns not to feel, everything we do that we learn that isn't really who we are, that's a step away from that soul essence. So every time we go back in an environment where we have to put that mask on, really, and be that person to survive that environment, again, we're kind of vibrating slightly away from our core. So it's like, it's not saying that the aim here is to completely be totally your soul self, because we're here to have a human experience. So we need some of that ego adaptation to survive. But it's about saying, having an awareness that you've done that exactly as you've just explained. You probably know the times or who you're with and how you have to do it. And when you have had to sort of vibrate away from that center, what are the practices you can do to recalibrate yourself once you're in a safe space?
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Perfect. Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? That's the power of, well, for me, doing the inner work continually. It's always inner work, inner work, inner work, and coming back home, I call it. And that has to be an intention of its own, isn't it? If you want that spiritual, emotional, physical, mental freedom that we all, I know in our community, that we're all striving for. So that's absolutely beautiful. And we're getting on. So, and I know it's late for you there. I just wondered if you wanted to share anything that I haven't asked you that's on your heart that you would love to, for the audience to know.
Yeah, I think it's probably just stressing the aspect of, the way I work, and I think is helpful for anyone to work, is meeting someone where they're at. And if language like your past life doesn't make sense to people, for me it's not about moving people to having to understand the world that way, because who knows, really. It's just what makes sense for you, and it's about what fits for you. I am choosing to believe certain things and certain ways of doing things, but I'm also able to enter someone else's reality, because it's that reality that is how they will survive the world and be their best version of themselves. And just because it's not my reality or someone else's, I don't think that matters. And I think as a practitioner, if we start putting our reality on someone else, we're also moving them away from where their kind of core essence is at the moment. Even if it may change, it may not change, it may need to, it may not need to. And I guess it's not about judging that, it's just allowing it.
Wow. I love that. I really do. It just makes so much sense, and I hope it makes sense to you, our audience, I mean. But yeah, there's a couple of questions that Sacred you always ask at the end of a podcast, and I wonder if we have a moment just to tap into those. And in essence, you've actually covered quite a bit in this short, beautiful session together. But one piece of wisdom or learning from your journey, your specific journey, that you would most like to share with those striving to find balance and well-being in their life?
I think it comes back to the phrase that we've said quite a few times about it all being energy. And I think it's looking at almost kind of looking at yourself and evaluating, where are my energy leaks? Are they in my feelings? Are they in my thoughts? Are they in something physical? Or is it do I not feel a sense of purpose? Is it spiritual? Is it spiritual? And it's kind of wherever your leaks are, if there's a leak in one area, the other areas aren't going to flow as well. So it's kind of like a hose pipe that we're putting water down. If your emotions are overwhelming and they're coming out the side of the hose pipe, your thoughts aren't going to get through. And if your walking practice, if you're not moving at all because you're feeling shut down and you're shutting yourself in the house, you're not going to be able to connect with people. You're not going to be able to maybe think clearly, etc. So it's identify your energy leaks and try and sort of patch them up one by one.
Oh, I love that. Identify your energy leaks. Beautiful. Yeah. So important. And then you can work with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you could leave our listeners with one practice or mindset shift that has significantly impacted your sense of well-being, what would it be?
I think a practice, it's a really simple practice and I use it all the time. I think it's literally to just take a moment and put your hands on your heart and just think, what do I need right now? What do I need? And always say to yourself, what do I need right now? And there's something about that movement, that embodiment of taking your hands and putting it on your heart, that I think allows the answer to come from here rather than from your mind, or and closing your eyes allows you to not necessarily be guided by someone else's expression or what they expect of you. It's making you go within. And for some people, that can feel super overwhelming. But if you do that and it does feel super overwhelming, then it's about, okay, well, let's think about, where do you need to get some help? Where do you need to have some healing, and who can you reach out to for that? But keep trying to come back to it. And if it feels too much to put your two hands on, just do one hand or bring it a little bit closer, or keep your eyes open and gradually build up to actually doing the whole thing if that feels too much.
Beautiful. Love that. Because it also reminds you to breathe too, doesn't it? When you
It does. It does. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you believe building stronger connections, whether with others, nature, or ourselves, can embrace collective and individual well-being?
I think we're here. Well, I think I said it earlier in a sense that we're here to have a human experience, and I don't think that's something we're meant to be having alone. So I think to make connections, what's happening neuropsychologically is we have to feel safe. If we don't feel safe in our own nervous systems, we can't make those connections. So if we're making the connections, it's a bit twofold. To make them, we need to feel safe, but then in having them, that increases our safety if those connections are safe. And we'll pick safer ones if we're feeling safe within ourselves, because it goes back to that energy again. And, if we feel safe, we co-regulate someone else's nervous system to feel safe, a bit like the sound and the entrainment that we were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's powerful, because safety is, one of the most important human needs, isn't it? And we haven't, a lot of us haven't felt safe and safe. I love that you brought that safety, or really clarified that we need to feel safe, and doing the work that you do, and the daily practice of just even this can build that sense of safety too. So I love this conversation. I feel like we need a part two because there were so many. Yeah, but I want to honor your time as well, because I know it's like 10 to 1 in the UK. So thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to hearing more about you and your journey and your work in the world. It's absolutely gorgeous and beautiful, and I'm really excited that we have people that are doing this work, and particularly in corporate. That's amazing. So Tracy, thank you so much. And for those watching, I forgot to tell you who I was at the beginning. I'm Joanne Irwin, and I'm part of the Sacred You community. And please join us, comment below, and all of Tracy's links will be below. So thank you again. I really appreciate your time, your wisdom, and your purpose for sharing your message with the world. So thank you from my heart to yours. Have a beautiful night's sleep.
Thank you. I shall. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.